Is this loud enough? Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started, even though there's the so great you are here because it actually might be useful to everybody. And I'm going to you actually would want to indicate that it's a universal experience to be lonely, and then to wonder together as Christians what we may or can do when we experience loneliness and what does it mean. Last week, Alex, because I changed their names. So it's Mary and Joseph, okay? Joseph has a daughter living nearby who is able to visit weekly. Mary's daughter is out of town and only manages to visit every second month. So how many of you know someone who is in assisted living? Just out of curiosity. Okay, that's about half of us. And living is pretty significant in a person's life. If you haven't experienced it, you need family members. And leaving me alone again. Okay, all right, so this is the case study. This is a real life situation of people that, that Barry and Regina know. Barry and Regina went to church with them, and so they were their fellow Christians. And so here are the questions that Barry had. 1, how can we help our friends other than by visiting them more often and providing some communication channels to their family loved ones? 2, that question is motivated partly by paying it forward. What can we do now and in the future to help ourselves when we too find ourselves in similar circumstances? Now, I'm looking around. Many of us are over 50, right? And so this is becoming a reality for us. I just did a database search the other day to find out how many of us in this congregation are 80 and above. I think it's 180 of us. And then 75 to 79, 125. So this is a real life question for much of our population. And finally, number 3, is there hope in better electronic communications? Joseph spends several hours a day on the internet reading news publications. Mary stares blankly at the TV. Okay? So, take a deep breath. We're gonna go to Joan Chittister and see if we can find some answers to these very difficult questions, and then have a conversation. Are there any thoughts you want to share before we go ahead and into the sort of the depth of the abstract? Ice cream cone.
Right there.
There we go.
Okay. I have to say, this reminds me of a book I read. It's called How Not to Die. And it's sort of a, has 2 meanings. And it reminds me that that's not the way to die. Whatever you can do to stay healthy up until the last minute. My goal is to lived my goal is Moses, really. He lived to be 120. Then he climbed a mountain to his death and had the devil and St. Michael, I think it was St. Michael, fight over his body. And why did they want his body? Why did the devil want his body? It was a good body.
Yeah, exactly. Please, Lord, let me die falling over and... I was doing some study. He died. He's at home and he's getting ready to go, and all of a sudden, boom, he hits the floor and he's dead. It's like, yes, that's... Go ahead and talk about the issue. Sorry, Hunter, go ahead.
Hi, I was just going to... hits really close to home. Very silly dog to St. Anne's Mead, and we were going around from room to room and asking if someone wanted a dog visitor, and we went into this one woman who was quite lovely, and I said, "How are you today?" And she said, I'm lonely. I'm lonely all the time." And that was with my 10-year-old daughter, who was just, bereft for her. And then the other reason it hit so close to home is I moved my own mother into a member here. Some of you may know her. And She lives in a really nice place, right? It's like the best you can find around here. And it's awful. And, when she first went there, she was down. She was really depressed. And so she went to a therapist, and the therapist said, you're grieving. And I was like, bullshit. Like, what are you talking about? This is the nicest place. You're the highest functioning in this environment. You have no limitations. You even have a car. Who in assisted living gets to drive a car? You have all the, stop whining. And then this has been, I don't know, she's been there almost a year. And I see her all the time. And I went one night with my same daughter, poor kid, she gets dragged all these things, to have dinner with Nana at Cedarbrook, which is not, sorry, I shouldn't say the name, it's not where we usually spend time with her in her dining facility. Oh my gosh, the grief she must feel. And I felt like, how could I have lacked such empathy for that experience? I was only trying to force her to be better, to seize life, to be grateful, to feel her faith and her autonomy, which she still has, even though someone comes into her room several times a night to make sure she hasn't fallen out of her bed. So your question, Barry, all these questions about what else can we do, how can we avoid these things ourselves, what else can help, they're also apt. And empathy was maybe the thing that stuck out to me that I have been lacking most, even though I think I feel for her daily, right, and act in as many ways as I can. I thought I didn't get it until I literally sat in her shoes for the bad dinner.
Yes, thank you, Hunter. It is a completely different experience. Then in fact, what Chittister recommends is that you embrace it. You embrace your loneliness. And that looks like being able to actually say, I'm lonely. The scriptures do it all the time. They speak of loneliness. My God, why have you forsaken me? That is the essence of loneliness, right? When you feel just completely bereft of the experience of another. And along with loneliness is not only do you feel bereft because of the experience of another, but there's an ache. It's almost sometimes physical, yeah? So how many of you experienced loneliness, just out of curiosity? Not all of you. Okay, all right. Well, I'm hoping that you can recognize your own loneliness and that we'd be 100%, because it is actually what we do experience naturally and often. So what are ways to deal with loneliness? Well, Chittister recommends that you use that time to be productive and develop self. And if we think about Mary and Joseph, right? They have all the time in the world. Mary and Joseph don't have to do house cleaning. They don't have to clean. They don't have to, mow the lawn and take care of the gutters or anything like that. They have all of those things have been taken care of. They don't have to cook. So they have all this time in the world, right? So how should they be combating loneliness? Well, they should be bettering themselves. Now, I think that if we apply that vision to all kinds of loneliness, we actually miss what happens when we're lonely. So I actually don't agree with that. In fact, here's what I've noticed with people who are in assisted living, as we're looking at this as a case study. When you are in assisted living, you are dealing with multiple issues. First, the truth is you're aging. And because you're aging, your capacity and your abilities have changed. It's not that they've gone down, it's that they've changed, probably for a purpose and a reason if we trust God in our aging process. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you actually do have physiological things that are happening to you that can affect you. So even if your brain is fine and you didn't have a stroke, you have cancer. You know? And the cancer is actually pretty profound in taking all the energy in your body and using it for its own purposes. So you're tired. You're also dealing with multiple drugs that are going in your system, and you're having difficulty with all of the stimuli that you have. So for you to think that, well, I'm lonely, therefore I should do something about it and embrace it and make me a better self, may not be helpful for Mary and Joseph. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Yeah, agree. Okay. All right, great. So maybe we'll hold on to that idea for them. Now, loneliness is a call to care for others also. Because you're lonely, you understand that you need someone, and so why not go out and embrace other people's loneliness, and then you don't have to be lonely anymore, right? You're together. So Mary and Joseph haven't done that. Now, they are in the perfect scenario. I mean, if you think of it, when I first kind of got my head around assisted living, I thought, wow, this is what Christians want all the time, to live together, right? In unity, in harmony. And here it is, and it exists in this really cool thing. You have one little apartment, you walk out of the apartment, and there's hundreds of other people right there. Like, you know, this should be what every Christian desires. I know you always think, Lord, let me go to assisted living, right? because I can then live my Christian life with one another. Well, here's what I've noticed what happens. There's disorientation in assisted living. Now, this is a little bit different than independent living. When you're in independent living, you have a little bit more wherewithal to know what you're doing. You can create groups and everything. But as soon as you kind of move to assisted living, your capacity to handle new relationships changes. Now, it's not that it doesn't happen. It can happen. But oftentimes, you're dealing with relationships with your caregivers, which then form a different kind of community. You're dependent on them, right? So the loneliness still exists, even though you're surrounded by people. Some have figured out how to create friendships, but you can't choose your neighbors in assisted living, right? You're stuck with who you are. And so for Joseph and Mary, they are in some of the finest facilities that exist here, and yet still experience the isolation. Yeah? Okay. Loneliness is painful. Human beings, we are going to experience the pain of loneliness. Maybe when we're young, so blessed that we have Jesus uttering on the cross, "My God." Okay. Does not. And let me just really quickly, this is a longing. This is what they're trying I need and want anymore. I am ready for something else. And maybe that's what Mary and Joseph are saying. And finally, loneliness is an opportunity to seek a blessing. In other words, loneliness is an opportunity for all of us, no matter what our age, to try to wrestle with God. God, why am I going through this? Why am I feeling this way? And that wrestling and talking to God produces a blessing. Now, I say that with the caveat that sometimes when you're lonely and you're like Mary and Joseph in assisted living, you may not have the capacity to do so, right? But none of us, as far as I know, are in assisted living yet, yeah? So we all do have the capacity to do that and ask those questions. Okay, so that's loneliness. Moving along, we doing all right? Are you all tracking with me here? Okay. I just want to really quickly go over love, rather friendship and love, and then I want to move into separation, because I think separation will be much more helpful. Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, forget about friendship and love in Mary and Joseph's situation. I think separation will actually help illuminate stuff. So according to Chittister, in order to be a friend to someone, you actually are getting rid of your self needs and focusing on the other, right? That's what friendship is. Friendship is letting go of yourself and focusing on the other, according to Chittister. So that process of stop thinking about self, look at the other, kind of what Hunter was talking about as she walked in her mom's shoes, that it really isn't about you and your stuff. And so to be a friend is to let go of self and walk in the other. Very much what Barry and Regina are doing. I mean, you know, what struck me about your story, as authentic and humble as you are, is they're not family, they're churchgoers. They were his church family. And they had a friendship here in church. Now they're in assisted living, and Barry and Regina still consider them friends and feel responsible and want to be with them. I applaud your love for them. And I hope that all of you will love me that much when I get that age and come and visit me. Really, the idea of friendship is what Barry and Regina here are showing as an example. Okay, love on page 3 is very similar in that that you are, you actually need to know yourself, according to Chittister, know yourself, recognize your, and in that space, go and love somebody. So what strikes me about this move, about love, is that it's humiliating, right? In the most objective sense of that term. For you to love another, you need to recognize your own neediness. Good. Yes. Yeah. You need to recognize that you're not complete in yourself. You're just not. You can't be fully who you are without the experience of another. So she recommends, Chittister recommends, that in order to engage in love, you understand that this world isn't a world of one, right? It's not the world of Troy Dostert, and everything kind of goes around him, but it's a world of all of us in which Troy is one of many. And so that kind of move allows you to embrace the idea of loving another. Okay? So that's love. So in Mary and Joseph's situation, Barry and Regina are showing love to them by saying that it's not really about Barry and Regina's life, but that Mary and Joseph are called to be loved too, because that's what the world is about. All right, so that's love. Now, let's talk about separation. What is separateness? So this is from Chittister. Separateness, the willingness to live inside ourselves rather than to live off the thoughts and words and chaos and clamor around us, heightens our very awareness of being alive. For the first time, we are free to really see the world in which we live. So separateness is actually required in order to fully grasp and understand the world. You need to create space friendship and love. So one could argue that in fact Mary and Joseph are in the world of separateness right now. That for them right now, being apart from everything that they recognized, everything that they loved, has created a kind of hermitage, so to speak, a kind of way of actually separate from the world that they recognized. Now, in some ways, it's not fair for those who are in assisted living, because in many times it's been forced upon them. It's not a choice for them. But let's go ahead and take it back to you. Some of us and the power of being separate, right? It's that alone time where you come to terms, where you're not afraid to think the thoughts that you're thinking, to ask the hard questions, and to wrestle in that midst. How many of you recognize and practice that separateness? It's hard. Yeah. I think for me it's really hard, and I haven't figured this out yet. I'm asking you, do you think that this is something that introverts tend to do easier than extroverts because they find their energy being alone?
If we are only one or the other.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
I'm looking at I guess the third paragraph. We're
Oh,
still on page 4, right?
Yeah.
or am I jumping your gun?
Well, do you want to read paragraph 2 and then 3? Can you
Okay.
read it out loud?
Sure. Why do we need separateness? Our lives are so full that we miss the fullness of emptiness itself. So accustomed have we become to the false fullness that comes with noise, the pressure of strange masses of people, the loss of physical space, and the mental chaos that comes with the unending technological availability, that we have lost our awareness of the gift of disjunction, of a sense of pure selfness, and the genuine fullness of soul it brings.
Yeah, so just to pause there for a moment, why do we need separateness? According to Chittister, all the noise around you is actually preventing you from being your full self and knowing your full self. So for Mary and Joseph, imposed on them. Time really can know their full self as they are in that moment. You mentioned surf the internet, I think, yeah, and Mary's. Sometimes the aloneness and the separation is acute, and we need something to dampen it. And so we seek something to help us with the deep aloneness. I will say, though, that especially when you're at that point in your life when, as you revealed, they feel ready to go, I'm not so sure that the diversions of the television or the computer is actually preventing them from their separateness. And I say that because what I have witnessed, and you tell me what you all have witnessed, I have witnessed that oftentimes when someone is getting close to end of life, they no longer actually need to ask these hard questions. They just want to. Might be happening with Mary and Joseph. They might be ready, and they're simply marking the time. Yeah.
In this position, right, in this ready to go, one of them basically said that their faith said that God put them on earth to make this world a better place, and they can no longer do that.
Ah, okay.
Right. So therefore they're ready to go.
Okay.
We've
All right.
known somebody else who also reached that conclusion, and so she decided she wasn't going to eat anymore, and she essentially starved herself to death. Another one had a urinary tract infection and refused to take any medicine, and that basically debilitated her and helped her go. What does our faith tell us about these kind of actions?
Wow. There are so many questions. I don't even know where to start. Thoughts from others? I mean, yeah, oh, Mother Imogen. Oh, Mel and then Mother Imogen, sorry.
Mel was the one I was
Yeah.
pointing to, so if you can get it.
I would like to think that,
Switched it off.
how about now? So I think when we talk about somebody that's in assisted living, we're starting at the wrong place in terms of trying to answer Barry's question. You have to go back before that's where you're at. And I believe, my experience tells me, that the time to have some of these dialogues with your spouse, with your community, is why there's still time to alter the outcome. And if you're at peace when you get to that phase, it'll show. And if you're not, that will show as well. And what he described as a graceful way, so I just want a graceful way, I'm waiting. I think you have to be at peace to feel that. And then separation takes on a different meaning, as opposed to I ain't going until they carry me out of here. And then separation is a bad thing, even though we all need that. And so the time is now. That's the time to prepare for these things that we all, ultimately, we all have to do. And so if you're sitting there at the next stage group down saying, I wished I would have, or I hope I do, you better get with it, because you only have so much runway until you're on the other side of that.
Good, thank you, Al. I thought that was incredibly wise to say that now is the time for us to be asking all these questions about how it should look. And let me say to you, practically speaking, please do not be afraid to have those conversations with the people in your life who may be responsible for caring for you. Please do not be afraid. It is a holy conversation. I encourage it. I strongly recommend it as your priest and as a fellow sister in Christ. How would you like someone to care for you as you begin to lose your abilities? And then where do you stand right now with your understanding of self and your relationship with God, and what do you need to work on? Okay, those were all great pieces. I'm running out of time, and I really want to go ahead and hit the point, I think, as I prayed on your question, Barry, that helped me understand it. And also because I've had a little bit of experience with this. As you well know, I've just said goodbye to a third parent. Troy and I had our 4 parents living here, and now only one is alive, and he's in memory care. So we've had a little bit of initiation by fire on how to deal with understanding as the outsider what it's like for someone who's in assisted living. So here's some of the wisdom that Troy and I have learned. The first thing I have learned is that our baptismal vows still hold. And one of our baptismal vows is we promise to respect the dignity of every human being. We promise to respect the dignity of every human being. Now, how I have experienced that, living it out in my Christian life, is that that person has every right to live their life the way who was very, very sick and really needed to die gracefully, refused to. His heart was done. He had congestive heart failure, 4 years old, and he says to his cardiologist as he's lying in bed and unable to get up, because when he got up, he had no breath and he'd have to fall back down. He said, "Can I have the Cheney option?" He wanted a new heart. 4 years old, you know. He just couldn't come to terms with the fact that he was at his end of life. It was the day before he died when I had put a DNR on him that he and so on and so forth. The day before he died, when I finally came to terms with the fact that I respect the dignity of my father, and I went to his room and I said, "Dad, I'll do everything I can to keep you alive." And he looked at me and he said, "I've had a vision. I saw myself above my body, and I know I have no more time. I'm at peace." And he died the next day. What I didn't do in the beginning was respect the dignity. I didn't respect his way of wanting to do this. Mary and Joseph need to be respected. However they want to do this is your call to affirm it, even if they vacillate back and forth. Because you are going to be in the same position, and I am going to be in the same position. We're all going to be wanting something and deeply desiring it. With Troy's mother, who was strong Minnesota stock and like unafraid of absolutely everything, she actually refused to go to the doctor for multiple years. When we finally got her to the doctor and discovered she had stage 4 cancer all over her body and she had less than 3 months to live, she turned around and found that out and looked at Troy and me and said, "I'm ready to die." And she wasn't kidding. We postponed it by trying to get some stuff fixed in her, and that probably wasn't the right thing to do. But that's what we did. And she was ready to die, and sure enough, she went. So all of this is just anecdotal in the sense that our calling as we care for others, and Barry and Regina, as you care for your beloved sister and brother in Christ, Mary and Joseph, is to respect their dignity. The other thing I want to lift up is that they are widows. He's a widower and she's a widow, yeah? And the scriptures spend a lot of time lifting up widows. Now, I always thought that they lifted up widows because in ancient society, widows really didn't have any kind of purchase to care for self. So they were the most vulnerable in society. They needed help. They needed others' kindness in order to live. However, having now seen and watched people who have become widowed, what I now know is that there's something beyond that. When you lose your life partner, it is very, very difficult. It is almost devastating. And that is why I believe that God raises up those who are widowed. So today, I'm just going to plead that part of our Christian walk is to reach out to those who have been widowed and be with them and companion with them, which simply means to walk. Companion actually means to share bread with, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I for the wisdom giver in all this because you're living it. Any last thoughts, Barry? Or
I still don't know what to tell them.
yeah, yeah. Well, and maybe some of the wisdom in this group can help you too. But I think what
But one of them basically looks on dying as the way to rejoin the dead husband.
yes.
You know, somehow to her everlasting life, becoming married.
Yes, and I've heard that enough times that now I believe it. Because